I'm gonna make this very simple for you, Dan. Men should not play sports against women. I'm not gonna get into all the bullshit that's going on out here in the world today. If anybody think that, I think they're stupid. Uh, I'm not, like I say, I support the gay community 100%. I support the transgender community 100%. But I do not, under any circumstances, under zero, think that men should play sports against women. And if anybody have a problem with that, they're going to have to get over it, because I'm not going to change my...
I saw a video of Enes Kanter saying that he's declaring himself as a WNBA prospect. So he posted this on his social media. He said, if simply declaring who you are is all that's required, then I meet every single requirement necessary to compete in the WNBA. And he basically says, based on the current guidelines, I can and am officially declaring my eligibility for the upcoming WNBA draft in April 2027. Like, I don't know whether to laugh, I don't know whether to cry, because like I've said in other videos, this league is the anything but basketball league. The storylines around this league are never about basketball. And I didn't realize what I was signing up for by covering this league to the extent that I have been covering it for the past 3 years. Like, I actually like sports. I don't want to talk about politics. I don't want to talk about drama and negativity. And it's literally, that's the thing that's in your...
Charles Barkley just looked straight into a camera and basically told the WNBA they're about to get sued into the ground. And the wildest part is, he's not entirely wrong. What began as a joke video from a retired NBA center has suddenly turned into one of the messiest weeks the league has ever experienced. With lawyers getting involved, sponsors growing nervous, comment sections erupting into full-blown wars, and Barkley appearing on national television while calling the entire situation absolutely outrageous, the controversy has reached another level. Here's how a mock draft declaration transformed into a genuine crisis for a league that was already struggling to control its own narrative.
What's happening? A former NBA star has now declared himself a prospect for the WNBA. This is Enes Freedom. He is 6'10", 250 pounds. He now says that he has reviewed all of the eligibility requirements and criteria for the WNBA and has decided to declare himself eligible for the 2027 WNBA draft.
Yo, shit just got real, y'all. If this is true, Enes Freedom said, you know what? It's time for the WNBA to put up or shut up. They want to talk about, they believe inclusivity and exclusion is never the answer, and there's not even a number big enough of people other than women, other than biological women who are playing in women's sports for it to matter, for all this fuss and all this, you know, all these people to be looking at it like a problem. Shit just got real.
Enes Freedom, the former NBA center known for being pushed out of a league over his outspoken political views, posted a video declaring himself eligible for the 2027 WNBA draft. He didn't shout, he didn't joke around, and he didn't try to turn it into a comedy routine. Instead, he delivered a calm, almost legal-sounding statement directly to the camera, using the kind of serious tone you'd expect from someone reading an official press release, not someone simply trying to go viral for laughs.
Current eligibility guidelines. I am officially declaring myself a WNBA prospect. If simply declaring who you are is all that's required, then I meet every single requirement necessary to compete in the WNBA. My team and I have carefully examined the WNBA's eligibility criteria and governing framework surrounding self-identification and inclusion. Based on the current guidelines, I can and am officially declaring my eligibility for the upcoming WNBA draft in May 2027.
What made Kanter's move so difficult to dismiss was that he never once claimed he was mocking anyone. He stated it directly in the same video, I am definitely not here to mock, make fun of, or disrespect any community or personal choices. I'm simply asking that the current rules be applied equally to everyone. That's a completely different tone from a troll account posting purely for laughs, and it's exactly why so many outlets struggle to frame the story as nothing more than a simple joke. He presented the entire situation as a test of fairness, pointing out that the WNBA's own collective bargaining agreement states that only women are eligible, but never actually defines the term, or clearly explains how gender identity factors into eligibility. Kinnear essentially said, if the door is open, I'm walking through it and I'm doing it politely.
I'm transgender. I'm a woman. I identify as sometimes identifying as a woman for purposes of basketball, professional basketball. So I'll be declaring for the WNBA draft in 2027.
Only thing I want to say is what happened to the people that made content, the people that wore t-shirts that wanted men to play with women? Where did they go? I've been looking for them. people at? Where's Cheryl Reeve at with some t-shirts? Where them content creators at, man? This would be such a good idea if Caitlin Clark had him as a teammate. Where all y'all go now? Y'all been real quiet around here, bro. Real quiet. What the hell is going on?
Two former NBA players, both standing over 6 stand, both former first-round picks, and both suddenly declaring themselves eligible for a women's league within the same 24-hour period. Kanter, for what it's worth, has said in follow-up interviews that he's completely prepared to actually show up if the league somehow allows this situation to go all the way, even joking that he's already working on his crossover. At that point, this was no longer just a one-off joke. It was beginning to look like a coordinated statement, and the internet immediately treated it that way.
This could get interesting. Royce White, who is a former NBA player and a Republican candidate for U.S. Senate, has decided to declare for the WNBA draft as a transgender individual. And he is testing to see exactly what the left is going to do. Now, I'm sure that many on the left are already going to cry foul over this because he looks, walks, and talks like a man. And I think that this is hopefully going to educate quite a few of them on what we have all been saying regarding this situation. Because this guy is a former NBA player. And it is realistically a situation where if they do accept him, it is going to heavily tilt the scales in favor of whatever team he ends up on. Now, if they end up rejecting him entirely, the left will have proved our point. So this is an interesting trap that the WNBA has been put in, as well as the left in the United States.
The reaction was immediate, and it was everywhere, on every app, in every group chat, and spilling into mainstream news within a single news cycle. The clips reportedly accumulated hundreds of millions of views combined across platforms, while the comment sections became a genuine war zone with people arguing not only about basketball, but also about fairness, identity, and where satire is allowed to end. Some people considered it the funniest thing they'd seen all year, calling it the perfect way to expose a policy that nobody in the league office wanted to actually define publicly. Others believed that two grown men mocking a women's league, even while insisting they were being respectful, crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed simply for the sake of a punchline. Sponsors who were already nervous about the league's ongoing trans policy controversy reportedly began receiving calls from reporters asking point-blank whether they would stand by the WNBA through yet another public relations storm. A couple of smaller regional sponsors reportedly paused promotional campaigns altogether while they tried to determine which way the situation was heading, and at least one national brand quietly pulled a scheduled ad rotation for the week, according to people close to the league's marketing side.
Said after another NBA player identifies as a woman and is now declaring for the WNBA draft.
I'm transgender. I identify as sometimes identifying as a woman, declaring for the WNBA draft.
So yes, this is very true. We had Enes Freedom make the announcement yesterday, and we now have another former NBA player, Royce White, doing the same thing for the 2027 WNBA draft. Now, like I mentioned, a lot of people are very upset about this, so Royce White responded to this saying, "I haven't even been publicly trans for 72 hours and I'm already getting so much hate. I just want to hoop with my girls in my feminine era. Why can't y'all be happy for me?" Now, because of this, the WNBA announced that they are meeting to review what a woman is after recent events.
That's when Charles Barkley weighed in, and he did not hold back at all. Sitting on Inside the NBA, Barkley called the entire situation absolutely outrageous. But here's the part that made people actually stop scrolling and pay attention. He wasn't just angry at Kanter and White for making the video. He was frustrated with the WNBA for putting itself in a position where two players with legitimate NBA resumes could make a serious-sounding legal argument for why they belong in a women's league in the first place. "Y'all did this to yourselves," Barkley said, pointing out that a league can't spend months publicly refusing to define who is actually eligible to play, then act shocked when people take that ambiguity and run with it as far as they possibly can. He added that the entire situation could have been avoided with one clear written policy months earlier, and that the league's silence was ultimately what created the opening.
I do not, under any circumstances, zero, think that men should play sports against women. And if anybody have a problem with that, they're going to have to get over it, because I'm not going to change. I just think it's wrong, period. If people disagree with me, I'm good with that. Hey, we disagree. Yeah. I'm not mad at you. I don't hate you. I'm not going to call you names, because that's just silly and stupid. But I'm never going to think it's all right for men to play sports against women. And I don't even think that's controversial. That's the thing that's funny. Like some of this stuff make, like when you see these debates on television, I'm like, yeah, men shouldn't play sports against women. I'm done. I don't want to hear you try to explain it to me. No, I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to argue with you. Men shouldn't play sports against women. I'm done. There's a lot of we can argue over.
Barkley wasn't the only respected voice from the sports world to jump into this. Shaquille O'Neal, appearing on his own podcast just a day later, said he found the whole controversy kind of funny and kind of sad at the same time, pointing out that Kinnear and White had essentially forced a national conversation that reporters have been carefully tiptoeing around for months. Former NFL linebacker Brian Urlacher, who doesn't usually comment on WNBA storylines at all, posted that he didn't understand why people were angry at the messenger instead of the actual message, a line that was quoted across dozens of sports pages within hours. Kendrick Perkins took a slightly more careful tone on ESPN, saying he understood why some players felt mocked, but that dismissing the underlying question entirely wasn't going to make it disappear, and that the lead needed a real answer, not another statement filled with vague language about respect and inclusion.
What do you think of these NBA players?
Oh, I think it's awesome. I think if they want to be inclusive of the WNBA, so these coaches that have been coming out speaking against Sophie have been saying they're the most inclusive league there is. We're about to find out, right? I think they should let these guys go to the draft and, whatever they identify as, let them go into the draft and see what happens.
Yeah, I think so. You are really a legend in football. You're a Hall of Famer. You played in the league for more than a decade. And I was actually surprised when I saw you standing up for Sophie Cunningham because we don't hear this often. What made you stand up for Sophie?
I just think it's a common sense issue. It's an 80-20 issue. It goes pretty much our way. I just don't understand why it's even a discussion. There should not be men and women's sports. It's just common sense, right? Biologically we're different. I think that's pretty well noted. People know that for the most part. I guess they have to explain to them sometimes, but it's not even an issue. Men should not be playing versus women. Shouldn't be in the locker rooms. Shouldn't be anywhere around them.
To understand why this landed the way it did, you have to go back a few weeks before any of this began. The entire controversy started when Fever guard Sophie Cunningham said during a simple interview that she wanted to protect young girls in sports and didn't believe biological men should compete against women. That single comment triggered a chain reaction throughout the league, with players and coaches taking sides in real time across live television and social media. Minnesota Lynx head coach Cheryl Reeve became one of the most outspoken voices on the other side of the debate, publicly and repeatedly stating that she supports trans inclusion in the league, even going as far as wearing a shirt that read, "Trans kids belong courtside," during a nationally televised game against Cunningham's own team.
I had to come out and say it. I'm transgender. And I'd like to pursue a career in the WNBA in all women's sports. Pick one. But the WNBA is probably most suitable. For me, personally, I hear a lot of people talk about us transgenders as sort of enigma. But nobody's really willing to just say, no, we're not doing it. We're done. Fuck off. And, why wouldn't I continue to pursue a WNBA career until the day when people finally put some guardrails back around common sense, logic, reason, the truth.
Reeve didn't soften her position at all once the cameras were on her. "I come from a space of inclusion," she told reporters. "The narrative that I think is problematic is to suggest that transgender athletes are the biggest problem in women's sports. We need to protect trans kids. To me, it's a human rights issue. Every kid has a right to sports." That comment, made just one day before Cunningham's team came to town, is a major reason people like Canner and White insist they weren't simply picking a random fight with a women's league for attention. They point directly at coaches like Reeve and say, "This is exactly what you asked for. We're simply following the logic all the way through to its natural conclusion. If self-identification is genuinely the standard," they argue, "then that standard should apply to everyone who declares it, not just the people the league considers convenient."
My views, as I said last week, I come from a space of inclusion, and the narrative that I think that is problematic is to suggest that, number one, that transgender athletes are the biggest problem in women's sports. And I think this is what's bothersome, is that there's a faction of people in our country that are making this a massive issue. We have some issues. Number one, we need to protect trans kids. every kid, to me, it's a human rights issue. Every kid has a right to sports, regardless of gender diverse, transgender. Every kid has the right to access. Now, what gets nuanced is, when you're beyond puberty, when you're an Olympic sport, when you have scholarship system, that sort of thing. That's where I say that common sense people get together and you find common ground to find a way to be inclusive.
Stephen A. Smith piled on too, and not gently at all. He spent nearly 15 minutes on his own show ripping into Reeve for wearing that shirt, arguing that it was an irresponsible move that failed to consider how it could affect the collective brand of the WNBA and how the league might be viewed by half of America. Smith made a point that has been echoed throughout sports media since that segment aired. You can support people's rights while still believing biological men shouldn't compete against women in professional sports. Those two positions, he argued, aren't actually mutually exclusive, no matter how the debate gets framed online. That's essentially the same argument Barkley was making days later, just delivered with Smith's usual volume and intensity. And as part of the reason, the two of them, despite having very different personalities, kept arriving at the same conclusion.
You are Cheryl Reeve, the head coach of the Minnesota Lynx. That is an irresponsible thing to do. You are a coach for a female basketball team. Do you not think that the females are being screwed over if they have to compete against an individual born as a male? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? You trying to tell me that a college player for the men's at a college program anywhere in the country or an NBA player should transition to being a woman and be allowed to compete in the WNBA? Or on a collegiate level to a women's college program? Whether it's UConn, South Carolina, Iowa, Tennessee, or wherever else you want to come up with. What the hell are you talking about?
Outside the arenas, the divide became visible in an entirely different way. Fans started showing up to WNBA games carrying signs referencing the Kaner and White videos, with some laughing it off as satire worth celebrating, while others held signs demanding that the league protect women's sports, using language borrowed directly from the Cunningham controversy weeks earlier. A handful of arenas reportedly had to increase their security presence for road games involving teams whose coaches had been the most vocal on either side of the debate. And local news stations that normally don't cover the WNBA at all began sending crews specifically to capture the crowd reactions outside, rather than focusing only on the box scores from the games themselves.
Enes can't have to say, right? You see how much of a mess this is becoming, right? And everybody want to act like, oh my goodness, we don't want to hate on trans. We don't want to hate on trans folks. That's not what that's about. Anybody who's hating on them should be ashamed of themselves. The WNBA, the NBA, and everybody else in between is absolutely right where they talk about not violating people's civil rights and liberties, not being hateful, not engaging in hate in any way, shape, form, or fashion, whether verbally, physically, or otherwise. We all know that. But what Enes Kanter is pointing to is about competition. So for somebody to transition from male to female, and for folks to act like it would be okay for them to participate in the WNBA is...
Now, here's where the lawsuits actually come into the picture. The WNBA Players Association fired back hard, releasing a statement denouncing what it called hate, abuse, and demonization directed at the transgender community, language clearly intended to lump Kaner and White's videos together with the harsher, less measured reactions flooding social media. Reports quickly followed that the league was exploring legal options against both players over what it described as a bad faith attempt to disrupt league operations and damage the brand during an already tense season. At the same time, legal commentators pointed out the irony sitting at the center of this entire mess. If the league tries to sue two men simply for following its own stated self-identification guidelines, it would have to explain in an actual courtroom exactly what those guidelines mean. And that happens to be the one thing the league has refused to clarify for months, despite repeated questions from reporters. Barkley summed up the trap perfectly on air, saying the WNBA can't have it both ways, and that trying to punish two guys for taking its own rulebook literally in front of millions of viewers would only make the league look worse in the court of public opinion, not better.
MBPA represents 200 plus individual people with different lived experiences, cultures, lifestyles, and opinions. We embrace justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Those are the values that unite this union and allow it to protect women's sports while creating transformational change. Transformational change? Hate, abuse, and demonization of any person or group of people, including transgender people, only fuel fear, division, and harm. We will continue to have hard conversations, but we will not be used as political pawns. Support the players, support the fans. At games, notify security if you witness hateful, violent, or abusive behavior. Only report abusive posts and drown out the bots and bad actors. At home, tell your elected officials to strengthen Title IX.
What's actually happening here isn't really about Enes Kanter or Royce White wanting a roster spot, and almost nobody on either side of this debate believes that it is. It's a pressure test, plain and simple. They're using the league's own words against it, forcing a conversation that plenty of coaches and players have managed to avoid answering directly for months by hiding behind vague language about identity and inclusion. Cheryl Reeve wanted the WNBA to be a league built entirely around self-identification and inclusion, publicly and proudly. And now, 2 former NBA players are standing at the door, asking the league to prove on the record that it actually means what it says. That's an uncomfortable position for any organization to be in, and it's exactly the position the WNBA now finds itself defending in front of cameras every single day that this story remains alive.
For discourse around trans athletes and what they can compete in, I would welcome a trans athlete on my team or against my team anytime. I don't think it's a problem in the world. It's just another way to kind of attack trans people.
There's also a quieter irony running underneath all of this that hasn't received nearly as much attention as the lawsuits and the sponsor panic. Kanter, of all people, built his entire post-NBA reputation around standing up for principles that ultimately got him blacklisted from a league that didn't want to deal with the controversy. And now he's following that exact same instinct, challenging an institution until it's forced to explain itself, only this time against a completely different league. Whether people agree with his method or not, it's difficult to argue that the tactic hasn't worked. Reporters who spend months asking softball questions to league officials about eligibility policies are now receiving blunt one-word answers because avoiding the issue is no longer an option, while millions of people watch 2 former first-round picks make the exact argument that reporters themselves had been hesitant to ask about directly.
Not believe himself to be a woman. Enes Kanter is not trans. Enes Kanter is an asshole who is using a major story, a culture war story, in order to cling to relevance. He is doing the work of right-wing nut jobs who are rallying around this non-issue in order to prop himself up, to make himself relevant. And in essence, also undermining the very integrity of all conversations around trans athletes and undermining the...
Whether the WNBA ends up in an actual courtroom over this, or whether the whole thing eventually cools off the same way most viral sports controversies do once the news cycle moves on, one thing is already clear, and it's not going away quietly. Charles Barkley said out loud on national television what a lot of people had already been thinking privately for weeks. And once he said it, he wasn't the only voice willing to say it either. Sponsors are watching closely, lawyers are reportedly drafting letters, fans are picking sides in arena parking lots and comment sections, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, actual basketball, the sport this league was built to showcase, has almost completely disappeared from the conversation. That, more than any single lawsuit or hot take, might end up being the most outrageous part of this entire controversy.